the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I studied...
What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it. So, very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time, I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer...
Involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019. Fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative.
The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse, the things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish...
To their other friends, they're all saying it's okay, let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people...
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why...
Huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part, yes. Because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, a Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who comes, he's the son of two Harvard lawyers. Reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to...
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to, like, end up with a sales pitch. Like, it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't...
Easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. Is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. And from the arms of one huckster to another. Like it's just like almost to something worse. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And basically like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later. But you actually own a bunch. Was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're great, it's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C. The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral. The money system has to be safe. Like your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like, or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to, we don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud where, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. Her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this. That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out. And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into it means playing League of Legends while on investment calls. Like at the time, that was seen as this charming, like genius thing.
On calls.
On calls. You could hear even actually. Okay, your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store. So he called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled all these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. Said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan, so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating, so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that. Ultimately, going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, so they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange, and the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. Hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that you're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's really taken that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that.
God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So the fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire. He's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong, you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But it's wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take you do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild too. The whole scene was wild.
Annoying. So
we don't need that.
The famous example is Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded.
Binance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar, your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's even more cynical than just buying one party. And it's well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, 100x leverage. Lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. Most of this $10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, information about that. He says, hey, I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any kind of ads, get rich quick schemes. You've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis telling you, they're 25 years old telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. So before, it's if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all, put one, let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into.
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to be that successful that you just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking
or system to where they could see you, Joe, deposit a Bitcoin on FTX, they could grab that Bitcoin and start trading with it immediately.
Wow.
Even though they were never supposed to be able to. That's the issue, was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who, like, pushed over the house, made do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. There's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interventions. Like, what exactly? Like, what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate, and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you're not supposed to.
Chemtrails.
Let me say this: if it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. Good person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it. He's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems. But found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your on your dollars or whatever, euros or whatever, and you put it into this crypto exchange. They have a bank, and they work with that bank. Then they exchange. But FTX was sort of the worst offender. Is let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. Why not? Like there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy Dan Free, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here, but the problem is that with the
one guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their Z on Twitter. I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when all...
It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff.
Go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new Ethereum. What are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
or something like Europe or something like that, is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no longer the CEO as of 2020, he hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did FTT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion. But so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had
down because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Really going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal, and we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there, and all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people are like, what he said in one of the interviews, he goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark because no one believes anyone would be like, everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly. Appreciate your transparency. Kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that...
And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was new. All the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. So by the third interview, I'd studied him and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to, it was the terms of to expose, but like I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about them. And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations.
I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world, and that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's like maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. Friedberg, shady. This guy
Allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
All. And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through him for like all these is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. If you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China, like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here, maybe that's a big deal. Stuff. You're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. We're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors because it's like, if I give money to you to give crypto is. Sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So like, look at the Turkish lira. Abilities, it's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value and they have to trust that like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's
Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customer dark, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually where he broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? It's just, he happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have
on sticks or something. Like it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right?
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. And
not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see him in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch of this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time you have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange, something. Because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? wire, or you were a grandma with who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, you know, more likely the grandson, he treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was done. You're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat executives, Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. Sam, you know, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, they bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also reputable stuff. And you start to have repeat occurrences. Like I just cover stuff all the time and you see echoes of the same thing. I just had somebody just a couple of days ago, I was interviewing for this news scheme we're looking at. And he said, you know, I know they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job, like be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just like, you're ours. And I'd go because it was like my friends like said, hey, we have to get somebody, you know, you want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was like kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys. You know,
analogy for losing your house.
You know what's funny? Yeah.
You know, I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say I give you this yield. He starts to explain, like, this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so, ultimately, Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But, again, it stops short. These guys, basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so, if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? Washington. And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be. So the person's not named in the report who was donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami. But that person eventually never understood how Bernie Madoff got people. It seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I notice with all of these things, the thread is crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot of years, then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader, this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but you know, right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. His whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet, and he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called actually campaign finance laws. I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate. And then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX...
Party.
That's right, but...
Also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah,
Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like I who enabled God or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, you know, people, or it's just like,
well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
Okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up, or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. They're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like not having sort of like, it's maybe not big enough. You know, they're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding.
Whiz kid who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
I started hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses, like, it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like, they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping isn't everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, there was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. You know, everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, it wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after, like, the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over.
Whoa.
Like, he lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got a dollar out of it. But that was what the deal was for: FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
He launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas, we're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to do what's going on. Now he's still, like, trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big, like, kind of scandal.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to. He's doing interviews with that A1Z, A16Z. I can't. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all the senator's office reached out to me. They're like, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. You guys have to. This is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all everything. I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. Money system. I mean, yeah, especially in our modern age, I mean, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, but ultimately the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me, I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me.
Inevitable.
It was inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So
that was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that. How does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. so many.
Is it a matter of time, or is it he's
money and go start trading with it? Unless,